Hey. So right now I'll be watching My Happy Marriage, episode 1. And I've heard a lot of talk about this series. Right now it's pretty popular due to two reasons. One, because it's barely coming out. And two, because apparently it's a very interesting series a lot of people like. I even had friends recommend me this anime series. That's how I know this anime series is pretty popular, since most of my friends usually don't recommend me any animes. But my friend Wendy told me, she's like, hey, have you seen this anime series? You should watch it. And I was like, I haven't meaning to watch it, but I just haven't had a chance to. But she did tell me, like, you should really watch this anime series. I think you'll like it. I'm like, alright then. Since they don't normally recommend me anime series, I'm usually the one recommending, or really just me and my friend Dragon Slayer talking about anime. It really did say something to me that, oh wow, this anime series is pretty popular right now. And I think also a part of the reason is because it's on Netflix, which is something that's a lot more accessible to people than, let's say, Crunchyroll or Funimation or really any other kind of website. Netflix is something that a majority of people do have, whereas Crunchyroll, not a lot of people have it. So I figured right now, since I have the time, I'll just watch the first episode and see how it is. See, there's another pair of jealous sisters right here. Hi, Tonya. Tony. It apparently has a very interesting story to it. Not necessarily one that I haven't heard of before, but it apparently does take a different twist to it. So I'm excited to see how different this series is to others. Since right off the bat, the series reminded me of Taisho Tome Fairy Tale, since I dealt with a similar situation. Since from what I've seen from the trailers, is that it's about this girl in a family who's married off to an unknown man, and she doesn't know how he's gonna be, although the consensus is he's not gonna treat her very well. And that's a very similar thing in Taisho Tome Fairy Tale. Although in that anime series, they focus on the male character, and his wife just happens to appear one day out of nowhere, and she takes care of him, and they eventually do end up falling in love. But his wife who was sent to him was apparently sent by his father. So from what we're told, is that his father ended up sending his wife to him because he needed somebody to take care of him, and also because her family owed him a lot of money. So in a way to pay off that debt, their daughter was offered as collateral, and she was sent to marry his son. And she didn't know what to expect. I believe she's barely 14 when she gets married to him, and he's like 16. And this back in the Taisho era. And she has no idea what to expect from her husband. She's never met him. The idea is that he's not going to be very good to her. But from what we see right from the first episode, that isn't the case. He's just very closed off and not willing to get close to anybody. Not because he's inherently mean, but because of all the trauma he endured from an accident that he had. That not only did he lose his mother, but as a result of that accident, he ended up losing his right to be part of the family. And his father basically banished him to a house very far from where they live, to basically live off in seclusion. So for that reason, that anime series reminded me of this one. And I've also seen some people compare it to Cinderella, and I can see why. Because basically that girl is being used by her family and then pawned off as if she's nothing. So I can see where the parallels could be with Cinderella, because she's not valued by her family. She's basically just being used by her family. But I don't know how much more similar they are to each other. And if I have it correctly, she's essentially sent to her husband so that the younger daughter wouldn't have to go to him instead. So she's basically pawned off to him as a sacrifice. And if that's the case, then it reminds me of two other series. It reminds me of a webtoon series, and it reminds me of a Chinese anime. Psychic Princess. That series starts up a little bit differently, but it does essentially turn into a sister for sister sacrifice. Since that family has been told that they must send their daughter to go marry one of the princes, the daughter starts crying, she starts begging him, saying she doesn't want to go, she doesn't want to marry the prince. And the mother's like, she can't go and marry that prince, what if he's terrible? They basically believe the prince is an evil man. But then it turns out that they actually have another daughter. A daughter a few years older than the younger one. And they end up sending her instead of the younger sister, because really nobody knows she exists. Since they sent her off to live in a remote place a long time ago, basically nobody around the area knows that they have a second daughter. They only think they have the one daughter. But since they do have another daughter, they end up sending her in her sister's place. And the younger one is extremely spoiled, and the elder one of course isn't. And she has no choice in the matter, and has to go risk being killed by the imperial family. The last one I want to mention was a webtoon series, The Crown Princess Scandal, because it starts out similarly as well. It's about this family with brothers and sisters, but unlike the others where they were either given the order or they were essentially forced to marry a man due to the parents forcing them to. In this series, a little bit different because the younger sister is of course typically very spoiled and very self-centered. Her only goal really is to marry a handsome man with a lot of money. And she ends up really wanting to enter into a contest to endure 6 months in the inner palace to possibly be chosen to be the crown princess betrothed. And since she already sent word that she wants to enter into this contest, before she signs the paper, they send her a portrait of him. But she hates how the portrait looks. But since she already said she would do it and she can't say no to the royal family, she ends up putting her older sister's name instead of hers. So now her older sister is forced to go to the palace and endure 6 months of inter-palace drama and political intrigue just because her younger sister didn't feel like entering the contest after all. But unfortunately in that series, the main character has a lot of personality and she's very strong-headed and she's trying her hardest to not be chosen as the next crown princess. And it's a really interesting series and I would really recommend it. So I haven't seen and read those series. I'm kind of curious to know how different this one is from those, and I really can't wait to find out. Now with all that being said, on to the episode.
桜吹雪は頬を濡らす雨、はら舞う雨の中で 春の暖かな日差しの木漏れ日も雲の切れ間から差す光や粉雪に反射する朝日も私を照らしてはくれなかった。
So she was unhappy even when she was a child. Whoa.
いつも目の前で消えてしまったから。そう思って生きてきた世界に私は必要
Whoa.
なのだとあのお方と。
Isn't this kind of spoiler though? I mean, the anime is called My Happy Marriage. It could be a misleading title, but I mean, it's still kind of a spoiler.
こんなお茶渋くて飲めないわ。いつまでそうしているつもりなの？
かしこまりました。
Ma'am? Maybe that's her stepmom? Or is she not even their daughter at all? Or is that just how she addresses her parents?
もうお茶も満足に入れられない森の娘として恥ずかしくないのかしら。違って本当に容量の悪い娘ね。
Oh. Oh, okay, that explains that.
先ほど達一様がお見えになられてたけど、ミオ様もカヤ様もそろそろお年頃ですからね。ミオ様なんて
Oh, yeah. They're still half sisters, but they're sisters.
様のことですから、ミオ様ではなく、きっとカヤ様と一つまともに
I mean, they're speaking pretty lowly. It's not like they're speaking pretty loudly about it. Oh, it looks good on her. Even though it's not as extravagant as her half sisters, but it still looks good on her. Is that him? Maybe? The possible marriage prospect right now? Don't tell me the half sister's gonna marry him instead.
ご苦労様です。
Oh. Oh, so she liked him before she liked her husband? Or is this a trick and he's just mean? Like you were. Hmm. Maybe that's his younger brother then? Oh.
さんには
こんな僕だけど君のためになんて
お着物が欲しいのだけれど。
Oh, it is like that movie I saw.
2、3枚買って
いいの？お父様ありがとう。トニカヤには甘いんだから。もうこのお着物ボロボロなのよ。
よ。いつも昼は
家の周りのお掃除。
黄金日の昼だが必ず
かしこまりました。使用人同然の私心配しなくてもに出ることなんてあるわけないの。
I thought it was the keeper from Koji.
ミオ
浩二さん、
He doesn't look very happy. Is he leaving?
うんちょっと大事なようだよ君の父上にどうしてこんなことに
旦那様がミオ様を。
黄金日の昼だが必ず家にいなさい
Is that today?
したらなんて考えて
Oh, does she think it might be a marriage proposal?
決まってる。おじさんとの縁談期待してはいけない。
It might be for the half sister, or it might be for his older brother. She looks too happy. Don't tell me the half sister took Koji on purpose.
話というのはついし家との縁談と浩二君に婿養子に入ってもらい継いでもらうことにそしてこの家を支え
It's the half sister.
カヤだ
使用人同然の私がこの家で存在を許されっかに過ごせる日々が
お前には嫁ぎ先は工藤清香殿のところだ
あの有名な工藤清香さんのもとに嫁げるだなんて。何の取り柄もないあなたにはもったいなさすぎるお話ね。お姉様は工藤家で一体何日持つのかしら。楽しみね。
すぐに荷物をまとめて明朝
Whoa.
殿の屋敷に分かったならさっさと支度をし
I knew this was gonna happen. In this way, it's kind of similar to the film In This Corner of the World.
ミオ
何度も言わせるなお前はミオを助けたいんだろ
Not like that!
とすれば、彼女はあの家を出られるにとって一番幸せな道。
ミオの気持ちはよりにもよって。
これはすでに家の繁栄のために黙っ。
お母様の桜の木、落ち込んだ時にここに来るともう来れなくなるのね。さようなら、お母様。
How did her mom die? Sickness?
どうしそう。
僕は本当に不甲斐ないね。結局何もできなくて。
いいんです。嫁ぎ先で幸せになれるかもしれません。
僕を恨んでいないのか。
恨むだなんて、そんな気持ちはとうに忘れました。
Does that mean she would if she could remember that feeling?
僕は君を助けたかった。普通に君と笑い合いたかった。僕は君を。
浩二さん、
かよ。
何を話しているの？
なんでもないよ。
あらそう。
浩二さん、今までありがとうございました。
新一様からのおことづてで明日出発される際はこちらのお着物をお召しになるようにと。工藤清香様は冷酷。今までの婚約者は皆に
Whoa.
顔気をつけて。
母の形見もほとんど捨てられこれくらいしか。
道中で召し上が
Oh.
ってください。
At least the servants care for her.
ミオ様。
Wow. It's certainly colorful. I mean, he probably wants to make sure that Kyoka doesn't think he mistreats his own daughter, even though he truly does.
私、とうとう。
Oh, she looks a lot like her mom. Did she maybe lose her in a fire then? I'm pretty sure he still cared about her up until he got remarried. Damn, so soon? But was it really because his wife now didn't like that he had a daughter before hers? It doesn't make sense why he would mistreat her so badly. Unless he was just desperate to keep his second wife around, and resorted to just being cruel to her, and that just became his normalcy later on. She was never really treated like she was part of the family after her stepmother got there. I knew it! She probably had it cut down on purpose. It's my kind of place, actually. Secluded, out of the way, no neighbors, love it. It looks pretty nice. It looks pretty big. Whoa, a female voice? Oh, okay, of course, he would have servants. Oh, she looks nice. She speaks so softly. Probably not at all what she expected.
西森美代と申します。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
いつまでそうしているつもりだ。
申し訳ございません。
謝れとは言っていない。
どうかお顔を上げてく。
この日、このお方と。
Damn, he has striking blue eyes.
私の閉ざされた人生旅動き出したのでした。
No offense to Koji, but Kudo is better. Damn, this animation style is really pretty. Right? It ends like that? It always ends like that. So this was a really good first episode. It really set the tone for the series so far as her family life before she got married. And then of course the next episode is going to be about her actual married life. If she lasts till she's actually married, and then after that. Because apparently all of Kudo's previous fiancés kept running away till finally it got to her. So we'll see how that goes for her. Mio's life is certainly different than what I expected, if not worse than what I initially thought. Because I always thought that in this anime series, Mio was the elder daughter, right? But I thought she was at least treated like family. Not that she was treated like an actual servant and her father didn't even care for her. I just assumed that maybe they just had the mindset of, well, one daughter has to go to this man, let her be the elder daughter we don't care that much about. But it turns out it's pretty much like all the other series that I've seen before, similar to it, where they don't really care about the daughter, they send her away to be married so she's out of the house. And the third one being, almost always the assumption is that the husband's gonna be terrible, whether it be cruel or mean or ugly, one of the three if not all three. So for this one, her father knowingly sent her to be the fiance and future wife of a man who's famous for being cruel. Like, what kind of father sends his daughter to a man like that? Although, of course, if the ending is any indication, it's gonna be the best thing for her. Also, again, judging from the title, My Happy Marriage, I don't think it's a title that's meant to trick anybody, but considering the fact that it's called My Happy Marriage, I'm assuming it's gonna be a happy marriage. I wasn't expecting, though, for her to have a previous love interest before him. And this usually happens when I watch series like this, where I kind of prefer the first love interest than the second one. But considering the fact that they never had an official relationship, and we didn't really see much of him, it is a bit easier to get into the actual male lead and their romance than it was to get into their maybe romance. Since he's known her for probably years, and he's been treating her very kindly, but also we don't know exactly what kind of husband he would be. Sure, most likely he's gonna be a nice husband. He would have been a nice husband to her, and they would have been fine. But the fact that he's marrying the half-sister though, not because he wants to, but because he's being forced to. And although maybe the option to run away with Mio would be something that he could do, there's no telling that he wouldn't become resentful in the end. Since he's used to having his family backing him, and I'm assuming he's never really lived like in poverty or whatever kind of standing they're gonna be if they were to run away and ruin their family's reputations. There's no telling how resentful he could become of Mio. The fact that he left his family and their financial support to be with Mio and they're struggling. There's no telling that he wouldn't become resentful, which is something that, it's gonna be a weird comparison, but from what I've seen from the show Ginny and Georgia, not necessarily a similar thing happens, but what ends up happening is the main character's mother, Georgia, ends up living with her boyfriend, Zion, in a small apartment, and he's forced to leave his creativity behind in order to work at the company his father works at. And they start off fine at first, but eventually the cracks start to show and he's very resentful that he has to work this office job that's stifling to him, that doesn't allow him to be creative at all because he has to support his girlfriend and their kid. When all his life he was used to having his family supporting him and his family's money, and he was able to do whatever he wants whenever he wanted. He even took a gap year from college. Not many people can do that, and he did because of his parents' money. But when the reality sunk in that when he chose to be with Georgia and support their child without the help of his parents and be able to raise his child with Georgia the way he wanted to, in the end, it wasn't at all what he was expecting. And with the encouragement and really push from Georgia, he was able to finally quit his office job and do what he wanted to do, which was travel around the world and be free. He was no longer constrained into being a working family man. He was able to just be free without worrying about a girlfriend or his child really, and having to provide for them. Although he does still care for both of them, he remade his life and he was free to do what he did before. So in that sense is what I mean, that they're kind of similar, where I feel like that might have happened with Koji and Mio, where he would eventually become resentful of the life that they live. Although on the flip side, he actually could have been very happy with Mio and be okay with living the way they do. But at the end, he even said he was a coward and he couldn't say no to his family. And although he doesn't like Kaya, he's gonna have to marry her. But I also feel that's so strange. Why out of all the possible influential men he could marry Kaya to, did he choose Koji? Because I'm pretty sure pretty much everybody there all knew that Mio likes Koji and vice versa. So I feel like maybe Kaya sort of pushed her father for her to be married to Koji, not because she likes him, but because she doesn't want her half-sister to be happy at all. And Koji was one of the very small pieces of happiness that she had left in her life. And to make things even better for her, Mio was offered in marriage to Kuro, a man who is known as cruel. And of course she believes Mio deserves nothing less than the worst. But I'm curious to see how Kaya's gonna be as the wife of Koji. Because either one of two things, well, one of various things could happen. But the main two that I was thinking of was that either Koji and Kaya do not get along and she's a terrible and really mean wife and he's just miserable all the time, or he does end up eventually getting feelings for Kaya and vice versa, and they end up living a somewhat happy life. Or what could end up happening is that before either one of them are married, Kaya ends up finding out that Kuro isn't as mean as they say and is actually really handsome, far more handsome than, as Koji put it, his plain looking self. Which in a way you could say, yeah, he does seem to have the very common character model. She's most likely gonna want to switch or say it's unfair that Mio gets a super handsome man and she gets stuck with Koji, how he isn't good enough, and you know, all that. To the point where even I think that if it does escalate to that point, she might even try to take Kuro away from Mio. She might try to seduce him to make him go with her instead and just leave Koji in the dust and just forget about him and not care at all. And try to convince her dad that, you know what, Mio should have Koji because he doesn't really have much to offer, whereas Kuro does. And she of course deserves the best. And Mio is too far beneath Kuro. That's just my theory though. So as first episodes go, I really liked it. And again, it really sets the tone for the series, how her family treats her, and more or less what she expects from her future husband. But just going off based on Yurie, I think it's pretty clear to see that since she didn't react negatively to her saying that she's going to be married to Kuro, that does say to me that he isn't as bad as everybody thinks he is. Maybe he just likes to give off the impression that he's a bad guy so that he doesn't get as many marriage proposals. And also people going after him just for his family name and his family money. I'm also very curious to know, one, how her mother died. and 2, how her father treated her before he met her stepmom. So I know grief changes people and makes them do things that they normally wouldn't do and maybe act out in ways they normally wouldn't act, but this was like over possibly 10 years ago that this happened. What power does his second wife have over him that made him treat his first daughter so cruelly? Or was he always like that? Because I feel like he wouldn't have been like that with his first wife. It wasn't until the second wife came along, and of course, from the moment she saw her, the second wife didn't like her at all. She hated the fact that he had a daughter before they had Kaya, and that she was a constant reminder that she wasn't his first wife, that she was a second wife. But still, to go to the length of just treating her like a servant, and for her own father to agree to that and still go along with it and not even care about what she thinks or how she feels, that just seems like a drastic change to me. But I guess if he wanted to keep the peace with his second wife, he just had to go along with it. And I'm not saying he couldn't just be cruel with her on his own, but I do feel the second wife kind of pushed him towards it. And then of course, that mentality is put onto Kaya, and of course she ended up hating her older half-sister and just being really cruel and mean to her. And the fact that she's dressed the way that she is, and she's going to an all-girls school, really reminds me of a film that I saw years ago. I forgot its name, but it does deal with girls, I believe, in a similar era. Because it deals with the main character going to an all-girls school, and then she does eventually end up being engaged and being married to this man who she doesn't want to be married and engaged to, but she does end up loving being married to the man. So there's 2 similarities with it. 1, the girls' school with Kaya, and 2, the fact that the main female character didn't want to get married in the first place, but she ended up loving her husband in the end. Which of course, again, we haven't seen yet, but I know it's gonna happen. One last comparison I wanted to make was that the friendship that Koji and Mio had really reminded me of the manga and anime film In This Corner of the World, since it dealt with a similar situation, where it dealt with this woman who lived with her family, and she was really friendly with this man in particular, to the point where I think either they were dating or there were plans for him to eventually propose to her. But what ended up happening was that before he could even do that, her family ended up getting a marriage proposal from another family, and they agreed to it, and so she was sent off to go be married to that man. And although she didn't really want to at first, because she still had feelings for the man who lived in her village, for the sake of not only her reputation, but for her family's reputation, she had to go and marry this man. She couldn't say no to him. Whereas Koji did have the option, although not without consequences, in reality females really had no power or say in the matter. They just had to go and do it, because if not, they would dishonor their family, and they might even face a really severe punishment for it. Now having said all that, I can't wait to see what happens in the next episode.